All right. Hey, I wanted to thank everybody for joining. This is Mark Bennett. I'm one of the presenters today, and I'll be the moderator. It's my honor actually to have multiple folks who are going to be presenting today. With Vishaka Sant, who's the head of our healthcare group worldwide. I also have Jeremy Knudsen, who's one of my peers, myself, and then Christy Druzinski is also joining. And then finally, we have our partner Edgile that we're really happy to have participant, and that is Gerald Carter and Jay Dial. Hope I didn't mess that up, Jay. All right. So to go ahead and kick it off, while we're not going to really present any roadmap, forward-looking kinds of information, obviously we don't want anybody to make any stock decisions based on what they hear today. So just wanted to be aware that, there's a safe harbor notice on this particular presentation, kind of keep us compliant, if you will. All right. So without further ado, it's my pleasure to turn it over to Vishaka.
Hey, thanks, Mark. So very happy to be here, everyone. And as we all know, especially with what's been happening, with the pandemic, the challenges that are actually within our healthcare system right now, there's a few things that we need to consider as we look at the backdrop of security with devices in healthcare. Some of the trends that we see are, there's more people and partners in this ecosystem of care delivery. Care isn't just when a patient has an encounter, it's really a whole ecosystem of work between payers, device manufacturers, clinicians, and healthcare organizations coming together to make care affordable, equitable, without compromising quality. Other aspects of it are care models are changing. Consumerism is at the core of healthcare centricity right now. Care is being delivered in many more locations than ever before. And across those locations, there's many more devices. So as we think about, the future of care and how care is moving from the walls of the hospitals and into the home, we need to also think about the various aspects of security and operations that are inherent to that. So what's driving this shift in healthcare device strategy? So one is integrations. Everything isn't integrated. People want smart hospitals. People want smart devices. All of these different aspects of having an integrated solution is key. But then also there's a lot of vulnerabilities that come with that. In addition to that, this notion of smarter devices, having sensor technology, having process automation, having personalized user interfaces, being able to connect the virtual world with the physical world and the nuances that might create. The ability to have, real-time analytics to actually enable things like precision medicine. And then from a regulatory and security compliance standpoint, there's more stricter guidelines in medical devices now than ever before. All of the different assets that are across a healthcare organization, think about the standpoint of Joint Commission and the ability to audit those assets to make sure you have security and vulnerability on those assets. And then, like I stated previously, we have care at home. So as care continues to change and transform, the ability to take that care into remote locations and still make sure you have the security and presence and the trust established in order to make sure that as you're receiving care outside of the walls of the hospital, you're not compromising the quality and the security that comes with that. So I know this is a bold statement, everyone, but in reality, next to the clinicians, devices are truly the most important part of delivering safe and high quality care. Just think about, envision when you've had to go into a hospital, if you've had to care for family members or you've been a patient, all of those things that are sitting around you, from the IT assets to the devices that are hooked up to you and in those rooms, all of those things are what we're talking about in terms of the broad spectrum of asset management. And I think so Jeremy Knudsen is going to talk to you a little bit more about the aspect of asset management as well.
Hey, thanks, Vishaka. And definitely starting from the perspective of asset management in general, I think we can all be requisite that Assets are requested, they're fulfilled, they're used, they're monitored. Then a service construct comes in here as well from a retirement perspective. And there's many flavors of asset management in the ecosystem today, and specifically inside of healthcare. Hardware asset management is really looking at that, again, the acquisition, but it's also that physical device, not only the PC, the desktop, the laptop. These are also the medical devices and the equipment that may have intellectual property that's sitting on it, maybe some leverage of software as an asset as well. And then all of those components really tie together from contract management. So how do we maintain, support, and understand all of those pieces? And the critical part of understanding asset management is really where it fits in the greater ecosystem of the ServiceNow platform. So as we move to, identifying and understanding even things that are inside of the cloud from a cloud spend, cloud management perspective, really at the core root of what we're going to be describing and having a conversation on today is that assets coupled together with all of the other areas inside of the platform in and of itself become really critical. So at the very beginning, and this slide, I want to make sure everyone is very aware that this is going to look, excuse me, rather large and daunting, but there's a reason for this. At the beginning of just about everything, you'll have a strategy, plan, build, deliver, run, plan, build, deliver, operate, programs to create better environments, programs to help support the audit, the risk, the mitigation, projects that are actually executing on device refresh, as an example. All of those things come into the play. But as I just mentioned, that at the bottom of this, there is additional components of the asset lifecycle that become important. Visibility, understanding where the assets are in the greater ecosystem, either through workflows or integrations that are out there, being able to take those nuanced components of compliance, audit, not only audit from a security perspective, which we'll talk about, but also audit from service management, the incident, the changes, the problems from the table stakes, again, today that service management provides. The connective tissue of all of this together starts to bring to flavor some of the areas that we're going to be describing even more in detail with you all today. So the visibility is really critical. Understanding where people are working, what development, what intellectual property is being done, and sorts of backlogs or tool chains that are being deployed to deliver better care to the ecosystem, all really has a wrapper around it that is this security perspective as well. So tying all of that from potential events or alerts that occur, security incidents, threats, and audits that might need to come along from a risk perspective, all really tie together from the ServiceNow ecosystem. So you might see that all of these constructs really help execute on a plan and a strategy. And really where we go when we tie these together is we look at them, not so to say in requisite silos individually, but we have our software, our hardware, asset management components. And these are metrics that, are not necessarily ServiceNow metrics. You can see the cited sources below, but average cost of a US material breach, 7.9 million as an example. See, I'm covering the asset component, but a compounding area, and why we wanted to share this data with you all today on what the power of the ServiceNow platform can do as a better together construct is really going to now nestle in the visibility of securing what you can see in your environment, and then also integrating that risk management profile from a pure workflow perspective. I hope this was helpful. And, Mark, I think you might have a little bit more granularity on these constructs, and we'll go from there. So thank you all for the quick time.
Yeah, thank you, Jeremy. I appreciate that. And with an eye towards risk, I think the challenge is really not only understanding where you are in your life cycle of the assets, but, bottom line, where are my assets? Who manages those assets? Where, as I transition data into the cloud, is that introducing additional risk or vulnerabilities? I have enterprise assets, I've got remote assets, I have assets potentially at home, at someone's home. And of course, as I roll out applications, which are crucial to any service delivery that you're doing, we really have to make sure that we're looking at how do I protect, reduce the risk, as they say in SecOps, lower my threat surface so that I'm able to really make sure that I can deliver those services in a consistent fashion. And that's going to take a lot of also priority management. If I understand there's a million vulnerable items, in fact, I'll share a story. One of our customers who implemented the technology very recently, about 7 months ago, committed to their board that the outcome of that would be they'd remediate 1 million vulnerable items. I was kind of floored by that number. 1 million vulnerable items. They committed up front that they'd have those done by the end of the year. And I'm really happy to say that as of 7 months in, they've remediated 987,000 vulnerable items, and they will achieve that 1 million vulnerable items remediation in fact, before the end of this year. So it gives you sort of a sense of, hey, I got a lot of things coming at me. There's a lot of potential threats. How do I prioritize it? How do I figure out who's supposed to get these assignments? Like if there's a patch request, where do I put it? Another customer told us for the first time, now that they've integrated these kind of different areas, there's a team now working on, hey, I know that Joe does this and Sally does that, and here's a team that does this. But that was tribal knowledge. They've actually put that into a system now. They have it automated so that it can be utilized. And then as you look at when these things are escalated for priority handling, the opposite is, hey, I can't do it right now. I've got to create an exception. And prior to this, all those exceptions were emails and meetings and requests on the phone. And then people would forget that there was an exception and it went out of the compliance window. And now they have a approval process with tiers of approval. They've pushed a lot of that decision-making down to the business unit. If they're going to accept the risk, then they're, on the hook to say, yep, I can't do this now. It's too crucial for our system. And therefore, we now have a cohesive approach. And in fact, they have a control board, not only looks at priorities and assignments, but also looks at exceptions to the point where if I have certain policies and procedures and everything's an exception, then I probably should modify that policy to be able to handle those exceptions. So that tie-in with risk management is very crucial. SecOps has to do things at the speed of a hack, but they have to do things reasonably within the change windows of IT and the exception process, and they have to have an eye towards maintaining that compliance. So if you look at this from a little bit different perspective, I might have something come along like Log4j that came in from an alert, maybe from the vendor, or it came in from threat intelligence. First, I have to be able to discover, where am I vulnerable to that? Where are all these Java integrations that could be hacked? And a lot of times that would take weeks or months to try to figure that out, because I had to go figure out who knew what was where. In this particular case, that automated process can be done in less than a day. And now I know in step 2, these are my vulnerable areas. These are what has to be remediated, has to be patched. And I can hand it over to the step 4, which is that remediation process. And if it's the case that, hey, there's an exception because the vendor doesn't have a patch ready, they got caught unawares as well, and I need to wait for them to get it done, so I can't, do that patch right now. And that becomes an exception that then gets approved by the risk team over in the section number 6. And then if you look at it from the other side, oh, we discovered all these, but we found out of 100, 10 of them looked like they may have been already attacked or corrupted. I now need to treat that as an incident. And that minor incident, which might be, oh, well, I got to go figure out that it's, not really hacked. It's just that I've got to, change some access controls. Well, if it turns out they have been corrupted and now it's going to take down Epic or it's going to take down Cerner, I don't absolutely want to go to clipboards for patient care. I now need to create a major incident. I need to bring in legal. I need to bring in communications. I need to bring in the disaster recovery team. I got to make sure the folks in compliance know that this is a non-compliant situation. There's regulatory requirements of reporting that. Now this becomes something that we can manage effectively with the root data still within SecOps, the remediation data still within IT, but those that need to be involved, like communications, know they have a crisis. We're all in a kind of a war room, what we call a workspace, and we're collectively working together to solve this particular problem. So I wanted to thank you for that, and I'm going to turn it over to Drew.
All right. Thanks so much, Mark. All of the data that we have discussed thus far is leveraged for real-time continuous monitoring to optimize your risk and compliance posture. This is done by leveraging indicators. Think of indicators as templates that automate data collection, removing the manual effort, time spent, and delays in tracking down data. Highlighting the components of security. As new vulnerabilities are identified, Key risk indicators can automatically be harvested into risk, allowing for a risk-based approach to prioritizing remediation. Similarly, for security incidents, we can continuously monitor for timely incident detection and response. We can also provide the governance needed to ensure that all of your critical assets and devices have up-to-date business continuity plans, minimizing the overall risk of business disruption. From a CMDB perspective, we can continuously monitor the effectiveness of your security policies, controls, and mitigation strategies on your critical assets and devices, reducing the risk of a potential breach. Jeremy spoke earlier to the constructs to execute on a plan and a strategy. In that vein, let's take a closer look at those constructs and consider the journey of a technology asset. Keep in mind that an asset could be anything. It could be a server or an application, a clinical or a medical device, or the iPad of a nurse who is checking patient information remotely. Highlighted in yellow are examples of where ServiceNow embeds compliance and risk within the life cycle of the asset. Once an asset is onboarded, it is inventoried with the appropriate information. By embedding compliance into the life cycle, controls are automatically scoped to the asset based on that relevant information, and we can use those controls to ensure a secure configuration from an administrative, physical, and technical perspective. This will allow us to track compliance with applicable laws, frameworks, and regulations such as NIST, as well as HIPAA to ensure that we are protecting any EPHI. The asset is then mapped within the CMDB, identifying and mapping upstream and downstream relationships, impacts, as well as dependencies. Log files are monitored throughout the asset lifecycle to proactively identify any incidents. Oh, Mark, I'm sorry, would you mind going back to the earlier slide? Configuration changes are monitored through change management. Security threats are uncovered as vulnerabilities are being ingested. Risk-based prioritization ensures that high-risk vulnerabilities are remediated and patched in a timely fashion. Since controls have already been scoped and implemented early on, we can continuously monitor the efficacy of those controls in real time, minimizing the confidentiality, integrity, and availability risk throughout the life cycle of the asset through the end of its journey. Connecting IT, security, and risk on a single platform provides visibility into your risk posture at scale. This is also encompassing of employee readiness from a training perspective and how the human element impacts your risk profile. ServiceNow quantifies processes and captures key metrics and indicators, allowing for executive level visibility into what is happening, what is working, and what could improve your risk posture and performance. Built-in analytics drive role-based dashboards and reporting at all organizational levels. Executive leaders can track and identify trends month over month, year over year, answering the overall question, are things getting better or are things getting worse? These actionable insights are helping healthcare organizations to become more resilient. Now we'll hand it over to our partner Edgile, who will share with us their implementation approach, as well as a case study from one of our healthcare customers. Jay?
Thanks, Drew. So I want to just quickly start with a quick overview of Edgile for those who may not be familiar. We're a ServiceNow elite implementation partner. Gerald Carter and I sit within our risk and security operations practice here at Edgile. In addition to these ServiceNow practices, we have complementary services as it relates to identity and access management and cloud security. And the reason that we mention those is we spend a lot of time with our clients helping bring those three worlds together using ServiceNow as the user experience unifying element within the organization. And when we're working with our clients, we want to make sure that we're bringing exceptional value, and it starts with our team. We're an elite partner with certified risk and security resources, experience in all of the different elements that Mark and Drew were speaking with earlier. We also bring to the table content accelerators. So it's important when we're starting to look at regulatory compliance, our risk posture as an organization, to have a framework that ties back to those different laws, regulations, and best practices. Furthermore, we need the ability to perform regulatory change operations as those regulations change and evolve over time. We also bring to the table what we call quick start configuration packages, which can help our clients realize short time to value, get using the solution, and start to change the way that you work. We also understand the broader platform, so things like asset management, how you may be performing ITSM operations today, and how that plays with risk and security. In addition to our technical expertise, we do bring to the table functional expertise with former Big Four partners, CISOs, and others who help make sure that the solution that we're building for you, meets industry best practices, but also helps satisfy your program objectives. The last element I'll mention here is that we're part of the Wipro family of companies that gives us the ability to deliver a boutique approach to our clients, but also provide that global reach and scale when necessary.
So one of the things we really find important with our clients is focusing on reporting first, making sure that we're meeting the objectives of your program from a top-down approach. So as you're building your processes, you're ingesting the information, and you're working with your stakeholders, the teams that need to have the data to have assurance and confidence in your program have the data they need to have that visibility. We do rapid build and walkthroughs with our delivery model. So we want to make sure as we're going through the configuration, we're bringing you on that journey and you're having visibility to things are being configured as the solution's being completed.
And one point to add there, Gerald, is that, especially with objectives like asset management within healthcare, there are so many different groups that need to be involved to realize this holistic vision. So these rapid builds and walkthroughs give us an opportunity to socialize that, ease some of the organizational change challenges many of our clients have faced.
Yeah, I think all of us have experience in that, as solution providers or your service provider in the platform, we need to be cognizant of our platform administrators and bringing them on that journey as well. We also do training and communication plans. So we focus on making sure that the administrators of the solutions that we're delivering have the knowledge and capabilities to take ownership of that solution, and that the end users who are going to be your consumers of those services also have the appropriate amount of knowledge transition and training to complete the task that you were asking them to do. And lastly, from a workflow perspective, we want to make sure that we're building workflows that are meaningful. We joke internally that the worst workflow you can build is a crummy workflow. So ideally, when we get in these situations, we want to really consume as much of the platform as we can. We don't want to have silos of information. That's one of the reasons you're on this journey into ServiceNow, is being able to leverage information from various parts of the platform, whether that's being able to tie your security incidents and vulnerability processes to ITSM from a change management perspective, from a vendor risk perspective. All of this information is also really important in completing what I would call a holistic risk lifecycle here. We're sharing this information across all these teams.
Yeah, and I would say the information around our assets in healthcare are critical to our ability to run a holistic program. So, for example, we need to understand who our suppliers are of these medical equipment. So those would be managed through our vendor risk management solution, making sure we're doing the appropriate due diligence and certification checks, and making sure that these assets that we may be procuring, meet our organizational needs. We then need to look at the risk that's posed by these assets, the different controls that we're going to implement to manage said risk. We can start to look at vulnerabilities that may exist on these different assets over time, performing scans, monitoring, and remediation, and making sure that these do not become a critical issue to the organization. The last piece I'll mention on this particular slide is as it relates to business continuity management. As mentioned earlier, outside of clinicians, assets are one of the most important elements of healthcare. And so making sure that if we need to set up contingent operations. We need to understand the assets. We need to understand what is necessary to continue to serve our patients and our customers. And all this is leveraging data that lives within a variety of different solutions. So whether we're performing asset discovery and pulling that information in the system, that can all be leveraged across these different modules.
So we wanted to take everyone through a case study we had with a healthcare customer that we worked with for almost an entire year on their journey. They wanted to really level set their program with an IRM, VRM, and a SecOps vulnerability response implementation. One of the things that was very important to them early on was having an understanding of what the impact of their CMDB was going to have on the success of this project. And
yeah, a lot of our clients always ask, I'm not happy with the accuracy and completeness of my CMDB, of my asset inventory. Is that a prerequisite to start tackling these other processes? And the answer is no. Candidly, we've yet to meet a client who's 100% happy with the accuracy and completeness for a variety of reasons. And some of it is, acquisitions of other organizations within the healthcare system sometimes provide us challenges in discovery. There may be other conditions there. So please, if you take one thing away from this, note that assets are important to understand and important to give us that holistic view, but having 100% accuracy and completeness is not a prerequisite for any of these other areas.
Yeah, with that, I would say, we've developed strategies to help organizations get around some of that accuracy and completeness challenges with their CMDB. This organization also really wanted to tie together the idea that vulnerability response needed to have an exception process that was tied back to their policies and their mandates. So we integrated the GRC policy lifecycle exception management lifecycle there. They also wanted to have a continuous monitoring capability within IRM to understand where they were on the remediation of the vulnerabilities tied back to entities. And those entities are tied to the CMDB from a CSDM perspective. So if we have business and application services, those underlying discovered assets are all bubbled up to those entities, and you have a roll-up of a compliance score for vulnerability across all of those entities.
Yeah, and I would say for this particular organization, they had operations in over 20 different states within the United States, and had numerous business leaders dedicated to risk and security within each of those different states and facilities. And so coming up with the reports to demonstrate to the various information security leaders, here are the different challenges that you're facing. Here's where we maybe don't have visibility into the assets as well as we'd like, where there may be vulnerabilities requiring attention, how you're trending against those various indicators, the different risk and compliance measures that we have.
The last thing we want to touch on here, they're on a journey. So, the next up for them are going to be focusing on audit management, the third-party security ratings of their applications, also expanding their continuous monitoring capabilities around security incident response and additional vulnerability metrics, as well as looking at configuration compliant for not only on-premise, but the cloud infrastructure as well. And finally, like a lot of organizations in the healthcare industry, they're really starting to try to wrap their arms around their IoT footprint, understanding, from an inventory standpoint, what's out there, and then working to, provide visibility to, different facilities operators, the IT organization, the OT organization, as well as management. What is the risk posed by those devices that are traditionally not been managed within the IT space?
Yeah, that's right. And I would say one other that maybe wasn't listed here that's on their medium-term roadmap is starting to look at business continuity management, which as it relates to assets and the CMDB's accuracy and completeness can be one of the better ways to start to crowdsource that information. You start asking the business to say what applications and assets are critical to you to continue your operations, and they may identify things that you were unaware of. And so there's a variety of techniques that need to be merged together with the appropriate governance to improve that visibility. And with that,
well, thank you, gentlemen, very much.
please.
And Victoria, you're going to wrap us up, and we are a little bit early, so we will have time for questions.
Yeah,
you,
so thank you so much. So, you know, I think you all can hear our organizations are dedicated to making sure that you are on your way to achieving the security and responsibility as healthcare leaders to make sure that your care is not being affected in your organizations. Protecting these devices from attack is a shared responsibility, and we all have a part to play in uncovering these risks and safeguarding our infrastructures from all of the sophisticated tactics that are out there right now. So we thank you for joining the call and would like to open it up to some of the questions.
Yeah, and if I could, Jeremy, since you've been kind of monitoring chat, if you would maybe anything you've seen within chat, or please, those that are on the phone, since we're about 30 minutes early, we got a little bit of time, and we'd love to answer any questions that have come out of this conversation, or anything that you'd like to ask us, since you've got the right folks on the phone here.
Yeah, Mark, this is Jeremy here. So I was answering a few of the questions in the chat, so feel free to use the Q&A as well. And if you obviously I don't think you can come off of mute, but feel free to post those in there. We can answer them live, and not a problem. I think there was some really good dialogue around kind of that end-to-end view, outside of putting a product construct to it. That is the power, again, of the ServiceNow platform, is having that single kind of that digital portfolio management view of that whole service to asset to security to risk profile and posture in one single lens, one persona. Another question that came in, Mark and team, was around other solutions that are out there. I think I saw one that came in around Splunk or Micro Focus, and obviously, we have a number of avenues to integrate and directly bring in through what we call service graphs, right? So predefined integrations that are built and certified on both sides of the vendor ecosystem that allow that data to be brought in, put into service, managed under a single data platform. Why that is also really critical for organizations is they're trying to consolidate a lot of what we've discussed today, is that they'll find that having to not write script, to not write code, to bring the data in to have an achievable outcome is really, really appetizing in today's ecosystem and world. So those are just a quick summary, Mark, on what I had read in the chat for questions. And it looks like there's one more in there if someone wants to answer that one live for us.
Yeah, I see a question.
Yeah, so
how has your
Yeah.
incident response module matured to integrate security platform APIs, and which ones are already integrated?
I can take that one. Thanks. That's a great question. It's very simple. If you go to store.servicenow.com, type in security, you're going to see, and then of course there's also a filter if you want to do free or fee. Most of them are free as long as you've licensed our product or the other vendor. There's somewhere around 300 plus integrations that we've done. And to note, those are direct integrations. What that means is that they're integrate directly. You simply load up the API connection, hit go, and it will automatically integrate to a Splunk or, Rapid7 or name your vendor. There's also, as Jeremy mentioned, the integration hub. You can think of that as kind of a two-way integration where you might want to have not only data coming in, but you want to have commands that go out. And those are also available within our system. So and the question is, I've been here for over 3.5 years. The product is somewhere around 5 or 6 years. We have thousands of SecOps customers now. So I think, over my course of tenure here at ServiceNow, I've seen a huge maturity in both the incident response module and the vulnerability response module. And typically it does, while you can use both, you can use them separately. And we see a lot of folks kind of starting with vulnerability response, trying to use the scanner data to populate some of their CMDB info, and then, kind of develop that process. And then where necessary, if they want to augment it, they go towards incident response. But we've also seen the reverse, where you start with kind of incident management because IT is already using ServiceNow. And the way to think of it is those tasks are, completely integrated, that you could hand off requests back and forth. And then, of course, big difference with other security products is it's a centralized database with CMDB that everyone uses, the GRC team, the IT team, the field service team, the SecOps team, they're all kind of working on one consolidated database, and then they're all integrated workflows. So as Jeremy mentioned, you don't have to kind of script this and cut that and paste this. And so a lot of that integration is a very quick time to value. Other questions? Jeremy,
Yeah,
would you help me with that?
Yeah, there's one in here as well. It says, how much do you rely on content services for your hardware assets? And that's a fantastic question. So we have the construct of a content library that is constantly normalized and updated. So, and it's also might dovetail into a question that I've seen here. So when we're identifying and receiving records, could come from procurement, could come from spreadsheets by today's standards, could come from vendors, could come from some sort of a discovery scan, very lightweight discovery scans. Also agents, so endpoint agents that are out there, some of them existing in the ecosystem, maybe BigFix as an example, maybe Atanium, maybe ServiceNow's agent itself. Very, very 0.0% of tax from a process perspective. However, the ability to normalize those hardware assets becomes really critical. And these are now emerged into not just IT assets, the construct of enterprise assets, such as CALs that are inside the healthcare facilities, beds, desks, chairs, vehicles. All our content that we normalize, we have a dedicated team that if we see something that is not normalized, we will normalize that as well to create one solid data model on serial number, make, model, manufacturer, end of life, and those types of perspectives. Really great question. We covered that in platform.
Any other questions? These have been fantastic. Thank you for asking us. All right, I'll give it a couple more minutes if there's any other info. We will make a recording of this available. It'll be posted for you to download. If there are questions that are more specific to your environment or things you'd like follow up with us, you can reach out to your core sales team. You can reach out to us. Glad to jump on board. I'd also recommend that you go to the community sites. We have multiple community sites for security and risk and a number of others. There's a ton of really good data on our website, and there's actually a whole bunch of YouTubes on different aspects of what we've shown today. But net, if there's anything that we can do for you, we'd love to meet with you in person, maybe do a workshop as a follow-up. And of course, we can always, discuss specifics around what you're thinking. Love to understand kind of where you are on the journey and, what's your vision so that we can help you get there. Any other comments, folks? Any questions from anybody else? Jeremy, are we good to go?
We can keep it open a little bit. We're getting some great questions that are coming in. So, I mean, if folks want to drop, I'm sure they can, but we can keep this open and answer additional questions if it's valuable for those on here. I do see one in the Q&A. Sorry, I meant to jump over to that. I in part answered that a little bit for the scanning of devices. So something you definitely would want to look at those devices if you have some affinity towards them not being able to be scanned. Sometimes it would be looking at that device type. And that would be a solution that maybe some of the engineers and the account team can look at those specific use cases with you. I know that is often a concern. It's one that we can remediate by saying it shouldn't be a concern, but then again, it doesn't mean that it isn't. So taking a look at those types of devices, looking at the schedules for when those scans are run, or also the environment for which they're run in is also important when you're solving for that type of an outcome. I know that wasn't a direct firm answer, but it is something that by looking at those assets, we'd be able to understand the environment and propose a proper solution.
I've noticed that people are dropping off. We still got some folks on. So Jeremy, I'll just rely on you to let me know when you think we're done based on the chat.
So what I think we'll do here as well, and I'm going to just again on our end say thank you to the team and everyone who has joined and attended. We will be sharing the recording as well as the presentation materials. It takes a couple of days for us to get those kind of compiled and sent out, but please check your inbox for those. And as well, we always encourage that if you are working directly with your account executives or your account teams and you have additional follow-up information you'd like, please reach out. We'll also be reaching back out to you. And thank you all for your attendance today.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.